Hi, welcome back. I'm Eternal Life Sentence. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about how to make a character that fits into a particular clan that you have in mind, or how to pick a clan for a character that you've already created. Now, quick disclaimer before we get started. I apologize if there's a lot of background noise. I live in the US and I am recording this very shortly before Independence Day, so if you hear what sounds like fireworks going off in the background, that is probably because there are fireworks going off in the background. So hopefully it will not disrupt this video too much. So I see posts like this show up a lot on various forums and Reddit and similar places that are like, oh, I have this character, but what clan should they be? I'm thinking of XYZ, but I'm not sure where it fits. Or, on the flip side, they'll be saying, I really want to play this clan, but I don't know what to do. And so this video is designed to not be a comprehensive list, and certainly there is room for a lot of atypical concepts within a given clan, but the idea is to just kind of help you get started thinking and cover the most common basics. A lot of well-meaning people will chime in with the advice, always start with the character first. Otherwise, if you start with a clan in mind, you'll end up as a stereotype with no personality. And on the flip side, there's a lot of people who get very frustrated with this advice because they feel like if they don't know what they're going to be able to do, they will not be able to make an actual character. So I'm going to put both of those fears to rest. You can make a good character starting in either direction. If you flesh your character out well enough, you should not have any problems making something unique. A good concept is not going to become bad because you knew you wanted them to be adventure when you started. And as long as you develop your character adequately, there are very few things that you absolutely cannot fit into any clan whatsoever. So, with that out of the way, let's talk about the Camarilla and the Anarchs first, because that is where most games take place. So, the Camarilla, the biggest thing to remember if you're going to be playing a character that's part of the Cam, is that siring permission is very difficult to get a lot of the time. So whatever, you might only get this chance once in your own lifetime, and you certainly are not likely, unless you're very powerful, to get it more than once within the average lifetime of a mortal. And so you need to think about, why was my character special enough to get chosen? This does not mean you have to be total Mary Sue, I'm the specialist ever, but your character should have had something that appealed to their sire over the half dozen other fairly similar people they might find in the city. And often this will be a combination of factors. The Anarchs are a lot more likely to embrace on a whim than the Camarilla are, because in many Anarch domains, siring permission just isn't that tightly regulated or isn't regulated at all. So you are more likely to see things like, my character was the child, the husband, the sister of another vampire, and so when they got turned, they turned me. Anarchs do tend towards higher generations, though, because many Anarchs are young. And while those two are not strictly correlated, there is a high overlap between young vampires and high generation vampires. So, talking about the clans that most commonly find themselves in the Camarilla, we'll start with the Brujah, of course. So, this clan, the Rabble, they look for passion. Not necessarily political passion, that is a very common misconception, is that all Brujah are political. But your character was probably very into something. They were, even if it was just, I take life as it comes and live every day intensely and to its fullest, there was something that really got to them. Brujah, with that being said, that means that Brujah are some of the most likely vampires to embrace on impulse or just because they liked you. So it's often a little easier to come up with reasons. And while it's a little oxymoronic to say to find a person who is passionate but also even-keeled, if your character's sire was smart, they're not going to embrace someone who already had chronic anger issues or a short temper that will result in them spending more time in frenzy than out with that clan weakness. The Gangrel, the Outlanders, they really favor survivors. They are not the animal clan. Again, another common misconception. Experience with nature of any sort is not actually required, although it is somewhat common, but they like people who are physically, mentally, or emotionally hardy. Again, this is not necessarily physical toughness, but survivors and overcomers and independent spirits are what's going to characterize a Gangrel. It's also more common than for many other clans because of their siring practices for your character to not know who their sire is. That is not, I will say, an excuse for not thinking out why your character was embraced, but it can relieve a little of the pressure if need be. The Malkavians, they can really be anything. They are one of the most flexible, if not the most flexible clan in existence, especially in the Camarilla. Anyone could become a Malkavian, and depending on who their sire was, they might or might not need a good reason to have done so. On the flip side, that flexibility also leads to them being one of the most difficult clans to play. And so, while just about any concept can be made to fit the clan, you're going to want to put a lot of thought into what that character's derangement is going to be and to make sure that it actually supports what you're going for rather than clashing with it or just being some kind of random addition onto your character. Because the clan is very much like the Nosferatu. They are defined by their clan weakness in a way few others are. And so it's not going to be as effective to play the clan while ignoring the weakness. Speaking of the Nosferatu, they have two kinds of embraces. The first is the famous Cleopatras, who I believe were actually named after the character in the old horror movie Freaks, who received a similar fate, spoiler alert. And they are spite embraces. The Nosferatu are one of the few clans that embrace out of spite. And they target people who are vain and good-looking, but vain or otherwise felt by the Nosferatu to not deserve their good looks. So Cleopatras are a route that you can go with the Nosferatu. The other option is a more traditional embrace, which is more common. And that is the traditional Nosferatu embrace will be an outcast in some way. They will be smart, or at least savvy, and on the fringes of society in some way, but also a bit of a team player, because the Nosferatu as a clan are very close, and they don't want someone in the Warrens who's going to be constantly causing trouble. They also tend to seek for people who will not be put through horrific psychological damage by being turned into an inhuman monster. Again, this is almost completely the flip side of a Cleopatra, but you really do have those two options. The Toreador, they are the other clan that is very likely to embrace on a whim. They spend their lives chasing inspiration, so anyone that inspires them sufficiently could be considered a candidate for the embrace. They also there are many Toreador who are fairly high ranking in the local Camarilla scene. They are commonly holding posts like sheriff or prince, so that is another reason, that is another way to have embraces that are a little less tightly regulated for the clan. But bearing all that in mind, your character, who was a Toreador, was probably exceptionally talented at something in their life. It does not need to be the stereotypical art. In fact, there are good reasons to make it not art, although that's certainly not a prohibited concept. But there was something that really just caught their sire's imagination, that they found it beautiful or unique, and they wanted to preserve it, is the common rationale behind a Toreador embrace. The Tremere are rather like an independent clan in many ways. They are their own little sect that is using the Camarilla to exist, more so than they are a true member of the sect. That being so, therefore, like I will talk about with the independent clans in a bit, they tend to take really whatever they think might be useful. Anything from people with great physical talent, to occult masters, to scholars, but remember, the Tremere are an extremely difficult clan to be embraced into because they suffer the same restrictions as any other Camarilla vampire, but they have the added issue of being mistrusted in much of the Camarilla and thus less likely to get that siring permission. And they also will have, any potential recruit will have to pass muster with the clan elders as well as the city leadership. All that being said, your typical Tremere will be smart, ambitious, driven, and a team player because the pyramid does not want to risk having more anti-tribu running around. They are very careful of their secrets. Finally, the Ventru. The pillars of the Camarilla, they like the elite. Depending on your individual Ventru, you might have different forms of eliteness appealing to them, whether that's financial savvy, blue blood, some combination thereof, but they're going to want someone who is considered the pinnacle of society in some fashion. Again, not necessarily traditional pinnacle of society. There are plenty of Ventru who are, for example, organized criminals. Ventru sires also spend a lot of time with their childer, and they think a lot about how their childer will reflect on them. So they like childer with a sense of decorum, people who will listen to what they have to say and not embarrass them. Alright, so generally each Camarilla clan has some defining features. The independent clans are very different. Each clan is also a sect unto itself. So they have an extremely wide variety of concepts that will work with them because they need to deal with all of it in-house, so to speak. If you are playing a Giovanni, you can't simply go ask your Bruja friend to beat up the people who need their skulls bashing in. You will have to find another Giovanni to do that, assuming the normal way these sects work. Obviously, within a game, things are a little bit different, but that is the exception rather than the rule. Each independent clan, though, does have a overarching goal as a clan of some sort, and so you will need to keep in mind how your character benefits that, not just how they benefit their sire. Because with the exception of the Ravno, many of the independent clans are also a little bit more organized in many ways than, say, your typical Bruja or Gangrel. So the Assamites actually have three classes of vampires: the warriors, the viziers, and the sorcerers. I'm just going to talk generally here. They want they do not tend to like to embrace works in progress. Whatever they saw in your character, they should have it or be working on having it by the time they're turned. As an example, they have an entire organization that's dedicated to prepping mortals and ghouls and seeing which ones can survive the process to the point that they are ready to be embraced. If you're being turned as an Assamite, odds are you already have the potential to be useful to them. Combat and magic are the things they most commonly value, but again, there's a wide range, especially if you get outside the Assamite warriors. You can come up with a lot of concepts that fit. The followers of Set, again, lots of room for different concepts here, and several sub-clans that you can work with if you want something a little more tailored to what your character can do. But they favor those who are already outsiders, free thinkers, or something similar to begin with. They don't actually require conversion before embrace, always, but they likely have a good reason to think that their potential embrace would be interested in what they have to offer, or could be convinced to be interested in what they have to offer. They also tend to prefer to embrace people who have some sort of mental or social intelligence, because so much of what they do is networking, evangelism, conversion. That is what building a cult is. They want people who can actually handle that job and will not just be dumb muscle, typically. The Ravno, I'm sorry, I skipped. The Giovanni are very specific in one thing, and one thing only. They, with incredibly rare exceptions that pretty much no storyteller will let you do, only embrace from a select handful of mortal families. There is enough diversity within those groups that you can probably find something like what you want, especially with the idea that they do actually, contrary to popular belief, marry outside those families. So whatever you want your character to do, you can probably just say, or be from, you can probably say with some intermarriage from other outside the family, you can probably make it work. But your character will have to have been from one of those families if you want them to have been embraced into the Giovanni. The other thing is that even more so than most other clans, you need to explain why this character was more useful to the family as a vampire than as a ghoul. Because the Giovanni have extensive networks of ghouls within their family as well. Almost all vampires become ghouls before they are vampires. So if you can't explain that, that's going to be a little hole in your backstory. And finally, the Ravno we are on to now, they often embrace on whim, like many others, and they are not organized as a clan, unlike many of the other independents. So you can probably come up with just about anything. Those that do make it for very long tend to be self-sufficient loners. But also keep in mind, the ideals of the clan are actually somewhat counter to making more vampires to begin with. So why your character's sire chose to embrace at all is probably a great deal more important than why they chose this particular mortal, for which you can come up with a myriad of reasons that could work. And now we are to the Sabbat. The Sabbat has two kinds of vampires. Shovelheads are probably the easiest way to come up with a reason for your embrace, because shovelheads can be literally anyone that had the misfortune to be walking down the wrong street on the wrong night. However, you just need to figure out how that character managed to survive long enough to make it to their creation rites and become a true Sabbat. Which can just boil down to they were lucky, or you could have any number of reasons that could have happened. However, true Sabbat, while they are not nearly as selective as a sect, you are still going to have to say, what did your sire see in you if you were embraced deliberately? This is particularly true for the La Sombra and the Tzimisce, who are the two Sabbat unique clans, because they typically are not the ones creating shovel heads. There are absolutely exceptions, but that is mostly the case. So the La Sombra or things that are in some ways very similar to the Ventru in that they like their child are refined and with a sense of decorum, but they also look for ruthlessness and ambitiousness. However, keep in mind that the La Sombra also like to put their child through hell, either before or after the embrace. So whatever it is they saw in your character, the character should probably actually be able to bear that out, or they would not have lasted long enough to be released by their sires. Finally, the Tzimisce, they also seek out the aristocratic mindset. However, many of them already feel detached from humanity in some way, even before their embrace. What that looks like varies from person to person, but Tzimisce do not tend to embrace those who have a strong grip on human morality, emotions, and general identification as a human. They also tend to embrace those who are very talented. In game terms, your character probably had at least one attribute or ability that was extremely high, 4 or above, because the Tzimisce, while it's not a true clan weakness, many of them are given to obsession and intense projects we see. While they're not nearly as exclusive as the Giovanni, they do have a few families of revenants, which are sort of an advanced ghoul, that they like to pull their embraces from. So that is a route that you can go if you wish, although there are some complications with that. And before we finish up, I will say a quick word about bloodlines, those being and clan variants, those being things like the Teluvelic Tremere, the Samedi, the Warrior Assamites, the Daughters of Cacophony, all of those assorted things that have been built up over years and years of books releasing. They're a little tricky, and there's way too many for me to go into here. But the requirements are likely going to be similar to whatever of the main 13 clans they're the closest to. A Teluvelic Tremere is probably going to be fairly similar to a mainstream Tremere, but just with some slight tweaks to adjust for the unique flavor of the variant or bloodline. That being said, you're probably going to have to justify to your storyteller why this character needs to be in a bloodline or a variant rather than something more mainstream. And then one more thing is that all of this is super flexible. There are exceptions to almost every rule, and so if you can work it out with your storyteller, go for it. This is by no means designed to be a complete write-up on every single clan or every single reason that anyone might embrace in every clan. It's more a guideline to answer those, oh my goodness, I just created this character and now I don't know what clan they're supposed to be questions. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter at Eternal Life Sentence. I believe that's what it is. I should actually check that. Eternal RPGs. Is that what it... Bleh.